Lisbon, or Lisboa in Portuguese, looks like one of Europe's most beautiful and effortless capital cities online, but after spending 2 intense days here, I realized it can also be hilly, crowded, tiring and very easy to plan wrong. In this Lisbon travel video, I'll show you my real route through Lisbon, Portugal, from Alfama, Belém, Chiado, Rua Augusta and Rossio to Sintra Portugal and Cascais Portugal, including the real prices we paid, the places I loved, and the mistakes I would avoid next time. And instead of only showing you the postcard version of Lisbon, I'll also show you where we spent too much, where we saved time, what surprised me, and what I would plan differently if I came back. By the end of this Lisbon travel guide, you'll know what to do in Lisbon, how much it really costs, the best ways to get around, and whether this Lisbon itinerary is the right route for your own Portugal trip. Our Lisbon journey started the previous evening, after leaving Porto, visiting Aveiro on the way, and finally arriving in Lisbon late in the afternoon. We checked into 138 Liberdade Hotel, where we stayed for 3 nights at a total cost of around 900 euros, which means roughly 300 euros per night. The hotel was located around Avenida Liberdade, and for us this was a very comfortable base because we could walk towards several central areas, but also use Uber or Bolt when we wanted to save time and energy. Since we had a rental car, one of the smartest decisions we made was leaving the car at the hotel instead of trying to drive around the city center. Lisbon is beautiful, but it is not a city where I would recommend driving inside the old neighborhoods unless you really need to. Streets can be narrow, parking can be difficult, traffic can be stressful, and because Uber and Bolt are quite affordable in Portugal, it honestly makes more sense to use them inside the city. That first evening, we just wanted to walk a little, get a feeling for the atmosphere, and eat something simple, so we left the car at the hotel and headed out on foot. Our first real taste of Lisbon was in Alfama, one of the city's most historic and atmospheric neighborhoods. After watching a sunset view, we walked through the narrow side streets and immediately felt that classic Lisboa, Portugal mood. Old buildings, steep streets, tiled details, viewpoints, restaurants hidden in small corners, and that slightly chaotic but beautiful rhythm that makes Lisbon feel alive. After this first short walk, we continued toward Rossio Square, also known as Praça Dom Pedro IV, and had dinner at the first place we found, because we didn't want to lose too much time searching. It was not the most planned or perfect first evening, but honestly that made it feel real. Sometimes after a long travel day, the best thing you can do is just eat, walk a little and rest. Since we wanted to use the next day efficiently, we returned to the hotel early and got ready for a much fuller Lisbon walking tour the following morning. On our third day of the Portugal trip and our first full day properly exploring Lisbon, we started by leaving the rental car at the hotel again. This is one of my most important Lisbon travel tips. If you are staying centrally, do not try to use a car for every small movement inside the city. We took an Uber to LX Factory and it cost us around 7 euros, which was very reasonable and saved us both time and energy. LX Factory is one of the best places to see Lisbon's creative and artistic side, especially if you want something different from the classic historic center. It is full of cafes, restaurants, small shops, design spaces, street art, and a younger urban atmosphere. One of the highlights here is the famous bookstore Livraria Ler Devagar, and what I really liked is that, unlike the famous paid bookstore we visited in Porto, this one is free to enter. For me, LX Factory is not necessarily the #1 must-see landmark in Lisbon, but it adds a completely different flavor to the city, and if you are building a balanced Lisbon guide, I think it deserves a place. After spending some time at LX Factory, we took another Uber for around 5 euros and continued to Jeronimos Monastery. This is one of the most important historical and religious buildings in Lisbon, and for me, it is clearly one of the best places to visit in Lisbon. We paid 18 euros per person to enter Jeronimos Monastery Lisbon, and even though the ticket is not cheap, the architecture and atmosphere make it feel like one of the key landmarks of the city. From the outside, the building is already impressive, but once you enter, the details, the cloisters, and the scale of the structure help you understand why this place is such an important part of Portugal's history. If you are doing a first-time Lisbon tour, I would definitely include Jeronimos Monastery, especially together with Belém Tower and the waterfront area, because this part of Lisbon shows a completely different side of the city compared to Alfama, Chiado, or Rossio. From Jeronimos Monastery, we continued with a 15-minute walk toward the gardens around Belém Tower. On the way, we passed several museums and cultural centers, which made the area feel rich, open, and more relaxed than the busy city center. Unfortunately, Belém Tower was under renovation during our visit, so we couldn't enter it, and this was one of those small travel disappointments that you only discover when you arrive. Normally, you can visit the interior and the scenic terraces for around 8.5 euros, and I think seeing the view from there would have made the experience stronger. If you only come here for the perfect photo you saw online, the renovation or crowds may disappoint you a little. But if you see Belém as a wider riverside district with history, museums, monuments, cafes, and open views, the area still feels very worthwhile. Even from the outside, Belém Tower is still one of Lisbon's most iconic symbols. The Lisbon city sign nearby was one of the busiest photo spots in the area, with many visitors waiting or stopping to take pictures. There was also an airplane monument nearby, showing another layer of the country's military history. Around the waterfront, people were walking by the sea, taking breaks at cafes, and enjoying the open riverside atmosphere. This is one of the things I really liked about Lisbon. It is not only a city of old streets and historic neighborhoods, but also a city connected to water, open spaces, and maritime identity. To speed up our day and also see Lisbon from a different angle, we decided to take a tourist sightseeing ferry called Lisboat toward the center. We paid 18 euros per person for a one-way ticket, which is not the cheapest transportation option, but as an experience, it gave us a beautiful visual route along the waterfront. During the ride, the first major landmark we passed was Padrão dos Descobrimentos, one of the city's symbolic monuments connected to Portugal's Age of Discovery. Then we saw MAT, the Museum of Art, Architecture and Technology, from the water, and its futuristic building looked especially impressive from this angle. Shortly after, we passed directly under Ponte 25 de Abril Bridge, which connects the two sides of the city with a very powerful presence. This was one of those moments where Lisbon really felt cinematic. As we approached Cais do Sodré, we could also see Caldeirinha Dock in the distance with its massive blue structure. If you are trying to create a more memorable Lisbon travel experience, I think seeing the city from the river adds something special. But if you are on a tight budget, you can skip the tourist ferry and use public transportation instead. Arriving at Cais do Sodré felt like entering another version of Lisbon. Right by the waterfront, there were food stands with street food from different cultures, and the tables by the sea were full of visitors. We walked around the area for a while and bought ice cream for 3.5 euros per person to cool down. Then we continued through the area with pink tuk-tuks and soon reached Pink Street, one of the most photographed spots in Lisbon. You've probably seen this street in many Lisbon vlog videos or Instagram posts because of its colorful umbrellas, painted street, restaurants on both sides, and heavy visitor crowd. To be completely honest, I wouldn't say Pink Street was one of the most impressive places in Lisbon for me. It looks fun on camera, it is colorful, and it is worth a quick stop if you are already nearby. But it felt more like a social media photo location than a place where I would spend a long time. This is one of the realities of Lisbon. Some places look amazing online, but in person, they are better as short stops rather than main highlights. After a short walk from Pink Street, we reached Igreja de São Paulo, located by a small square with cafes around it, and from there we arrived at Time Out Market, one of Lisbon's most popular food spots. If you are looking for Lisbon food in a practical and easy way, Time Out Market is a very convenient place because you can find many different food options in one location without spending too much time searching for restaurants. It is not exactly hidden or local anymore, and yes, it is touristy, but sometimes touristy places are popular for a reason. After walking briefly inside the market, we continued to Jardim da Bandeira, where we explored the street stalls behind the market. This area had a more urban texture, with graffiti-covered walls, colorful buildings, and a casual atmosphere. At this point in the day, Lisbon started to feel like a city that constantly changes mood every few streets. One moment you are in a historic square, then a food market, then a graffiti-filled urban corner, then a steep street leading to a viewpoint. By this point, I had already understood one thing. Lisbon is not difficult to enjoy, but it is very easy to underestimate. On a map, many places look close to each other, but in reality the hills, heat, crowds and constant walking can make the day much more tiring than expected. After Cais do Sodré and Time Out Market, we continued into Lisbon's hilly streets, and this is where I really started to feel one of the biggest challenges of the city. Lisbon is beautiful, but it is also very hilly, and if you try to walk everywhere, especially in warm weather, it can get tiring quickly. This is something every Lisbon tour guide should tell first-time visitors clearly. Wear comfortable shoes, carry water, plan your route smartly, and don't underestimate the climbs. As we walked through the side streets, we saw interesting architecture, historic fountains, unique Portuguese city details, and small corners that made the effort feel worth it. After a short walk, we reached Miraduro de Santa Catarina, another viewpoint where we stopped for a short break and enjoyed the view. Around us, we could see tourists trying to cool down in shaded areas, and honestly, I understood them completely. Lisbon is not a flat and effortless city. It rewards you with views, but it also makes you work for them. From Miraduro de Santa Catarina, we continued toward Chiado, passing museums, cafes, shaded corners, and streets filled with movement. On the way, we stopped at a viewpoint for the Bica funicular, hoping to see one of Lisbon's classic funicular experiences. But after waiting for a while, we learned that it was out of service because of a technical issue. This was one of those small but real travel moments that can change your route. You plan to use or film something iconic, and then suddenly it doesn't work. But instead of waiting longer, we continued through the streets with trams, shops and cafes. I actually think this is part of Lisbon's character. The city is beautiful and historic, but sometimes it is also unpredictable, crowded, and a little tiring. That balance made the experience feel more real. In Chiado, our first major stop was Praça Luís de Camões, where the large Monumento a Camões stands in the middle of the square. This area also sits close to Bairro Alto, one of Lisbon's most famous nightlife and restaurant neighborhoods. So during the day, it feels central and cultural, while at night the surrounding streets become much more energetic. On both corners of the square, Igreja de Nossa Senhora do Loreto and Igreja de Nossa Senhora da Encarnação de Lisboa show the religious importance of the area. Nearby, Galeria Fidelidade Arte and the statue of Antonio Ribeiro also add a cultural layer to this neighborhood. After a very short cafe break, we continued past Basílica de Nossa Senhora dos Mártires and then walked along Rua Augusta, a 210-meter-long street known as one of the most popular shopping streets in Chiado, especially because of its luxury stores. This area felt polished, elegant, and very walkable compared to the steeper parts we had just climbed. After Chiado, we continued toward Rua Augusta, but before walking up the street, we spent time at Praça do Comércio, one of Lisbon's most impressive and iconic squares. This is one of those places that immediately gives you the grand capital city feeling. It is wide, open, facing the river, surrounded by beautiful architecture, and definitely one of the classic stops on any Lisbon city tour. We walked around, took photos, and then continued up Rua Augusta through shops, cafes, and restaurants. This is one of the busiest and most tourist-friendly areas of Lisbon, so if you want quiet local streets, this is not the place. But if it is your first time in the city and you want that classic central Lisbon atmosphere, Rua Augusta works very well. On the way, we stopped at a bakery and paid €9 for a box of 6 pastéis de nata. They are famous, they are touristy, but they are also genuinely delicious, and I think trying them is one of the simple pleasures of any Lisbon trip. A little further up from Rua Augusta, we visited Elevador de Santa Justa, where we paid €6 per person. From here you get an elevated view of the city, and you can also see Convento do Carmo from a beautiful angle. I liked the view, but I would also say this is one of those places where your expectations matter. If you love viewpoints and photography, it can be worth it. But if you are already planning several miraduros around Lisbon, you may not feel that this is absolutely essential. Still, because of its central location and historic character, Elevador de Santa Justa remains one of the classic things to do in Lisbon, especially for first-time visitors. The view over the surrounding buildings, the angle toward Convento do Carmo, and the overall experience make it a good short stop if the queue is not too long. After Elevador de Santa Justa, we continued toward Praça Dom Pedro IV, also known as Rossio Square. First, Fonte Sul do Rossio welcomed us, followed by Coluna de Dom Pedro IV, and then Fonte Norte do Rossio and Teatro Nacional Dona Maria de Tiu completed the impressive architectural scene of the square. Right next to the theater building, a smaller square also marks the beginning of Rua das Portas de Santo Antão, one of the busy streets in the area. Nearby, Igreja de São Domingos de Lisboa stood with a very powerful presence, and the Rossio train station impressed us with its beautiful facade. This area also has many luxury hotels, so it feels very central and polished. We also visited one of those sardine shops that are very unique to Portugal and very popular with tourists. They are colorful, fun, and a little theatrical, and even if you don't buy anything, they are interesting to see. Later, we had dinner in the area, and including drinks, we paid around 25 euros per person. After dinner, we walked around 5 minutes back to Avenida Liberdade, where our hotel was located, and after a very full first day, we finally rested. Our fourth day of the Portugal trip and our second full day around Lisbon started with breakfast at the hotel. After breakfast, we took the rental car and drove towards Sintra Portugal. The drive took around 30 minutes, and when we arrived in Sintra's center, we found a parking spot and paid 1.5 euros. The first thing we noticed while walking around Sintra was how peaceful and elegant it felt compared to Lisbon. There were beautiful houses with views, a calmer atmosphere, greener surroundings, and a slower rhythm that immediately made the place feel different from the capital. I really liked this contrast. Lisbon gives you energy, movement, viewpoints, and urban chaos, while Sintra feels more like a fairy tale town hidden in the hills. If you are planning a Portugal travel vlog route around Lisbon, I really think Sintra should not be skipped. Before arriving in Sintra, we had arranged a 1-hour private tuk-tuk tour through getyourguide.com for 50 euros per person. While waiting for our meeting time, we walked around the center and explored the atmosphere a little. Once the tuk-tuk driver arrived, we started our tour from the center and began climbing toward the upper areas. Along the way, colorful buildings and walls surrounding what looked like entrances of large mansions caught our attention. Our first stop was Fonte da Sabuga, where we stopped briefly and looked at the first views of the historic upper town. The tuk-tuk tour was convenient because Sintra is hilly and spread out, but I have to be honest, 50 euros per person for 1 hour is not cheap. If you are traveling on a tighter budget, you may prefer the Sintra hop-on hop-off bus, where a full-day ticket is around 15 euros, or you can plan more time and move around more slowly. This was also the moment I realized that Sintra is not a place you should visit casually, without a plan. You can still enjoy the town, but if you want a full experience, you need to think about tickets, transportation, timing, and how much walking you are willing to do before you arrive. From Fonte da Sabuga, after a very short ride, we stopped briefly in front of Quinta da Regaleira. This historic site is especially famous for its stairs and mysterious atmosphere, but because we did not have tickets in advance and did not want to lose time, we did not enter. If you want to visit it, the entrance is around 20 euros per person. This was one of the first moments where I realized that Sintra really needs better planning than we gave it. If you arrive without tickets and without enough time, you can still enjoy the town, but you may miss some of its most famous interiors. A little further ahead, we visited or passed historic and luxurious buildings such as Palacio e Parque Biester and Chalet Relogio, which added to that elegant, almost storybook feeling of the area. Sintra is not just one attraction. It is a full landscape of palaces, villas, viewpoints, gardens, and narrow roads. Our next stop was a viewpoint where we could see and film Castelo dos Muros from a distance. Even without entering, seeing the castle walls on the hill gave the route a much more dramatic feeling. A little further ahead, we stopped briefly at Parque da Pena. From there we saw Palacio Nacional da Pena from a distance and walked a little around the park. Inside the park, there were duck houses shaped like miniature castles, which was a small but memorable detail. Then we reached the entrance gate of Palacio Nacional da Pena. Since we had not bought tickets in advance and did not have enough time, we did not go inside. But if you are planning your own trip, I definitely recommend visiting the palace interior by paying around 20 euros per person. This is one of the biggest things I would do differently next time. Sintra is too special to rush. If you want the full experience, buy tickets in advance and give yourself at least a full day. At the end of the Tuk-Tuk tour, we asked our driver to drop us in the upper historic center of Sintra. We walked toward the center, passing local sales stands along the way. Since the town is built in layers on the hills, every corner gives you a different perspective. One of the first things we noticed in the center was the News Museum, and from there we continued between beautiful and colorful buildings. The area was full of souvenir shops, restaurants and cafes visited by many tourists. Without a doubt, the most eye-catching building in the center was Palacio Nacional de Sintra. Everywhere you turn in Sintra, there is another photographic angle. On one side, there was a bright blue restaurant, and right next to it, a yellow building with a red telephone booth in front of it. This mix of colors really showed the character of the town. Between the colorful buildings, Torre do Relógio stood as a beautiful example of architectural variety blending together. The Sintra Tourism Building, quiet narrow streets, and aesthetic structures made the town feel like a place where you can just get lost without a strict plan. In the side streets of Sintra, we also saw closed restaurants, boutique-style shops, souvenir displays, and dense tourist crowds. Igreja de São Martinho almost looked hidden between buildings at first, but as we got closer, it revealed itself. After a short walk, as we returned downhill through the same route, the scenery felt completely different again, which is one of the things I loved about Sintra. Even if you walk the same street twice, the angles, colors, and views change. Around the liveliest part of the center, we stopped to rest and had lunch. We paid around 25 euros per person for Portuguese-style roasted chicken and another pastel de nata. After lunch, we continued exploring Sintra's side streets, where souvenir products were lined up, tourists filled the alleys, and even some photo spots had people waiting in line. When we came back down, there was a live street music group, and tourists were gathering around and joining the atmosphere. For anyone wanting to stay in Sintra, accommodation options range from standard places around 100 to 200 euros per night, all the way up to luxury stays reaching around 1000 euros per night. After one final walk, we returned to our car and ended our Sintra visit, which lasted almost 4 hours. Around 2 p.m., we left Sintra and drove toward Cascais. The drive took around 25 minutes. We followed the A16 high-speed regional road and then connected to the A5 motorway, which links Lisbon and Cascais. Once we arrived in Cascais Center, we parked under the large Hotel Baia and paid 5 euros for 2 hours. As soon as we exited the parking area, our first stop was Alameda Combatentes da Grande Guerra, one of the liveliest areas connecting the coast and the town center. Right away, we saw colorful buildings, tourist-filled streets, shops, and restaurants, and the atmosphere immediately felt more like a seaside holiday town than a capital city. After the hills and fairy tale architecture of Sintra, Cascais felt fresh, open, and relaxing. This is why I think combining Lisbon, Sintra, and Cascais in one route is so powerful. Each place has a completely different mood. After passing Largo Cidade de Vitoria, a small square where Junta de Freguesia de Cascais e Estoril is located, we started walking along Rua Frederico Arouca, one of the liveliest streets in town. There were shops on both sides, a large tourist crowd, cafes, restaurants, and classic Portuguese pavement that made the area feel charming and polished. The souvenir shops along the way were full of products related to both Cascais and Lisbon. Since it was after lunchtime, the restaurants were a little calmer, which made the walk more enjoyable. At the end of the street, we reached Mirador da Praia da Rainha, overlooking Praia da Rainha, one of the most beautiful small beach views in Cascais. The beach was packed with people sunbathing and enjoying the cold Atlantic water. This was one of those moments where the trip suddenly felt like a summer holiday instead of a city trip. If you have time during your Lisbon visit, I really think Cascais is worth adding, especially if you want the trip to feel more balanced. After enjoying the view at Praia da Rainha, we continued walking through the town center. Cascais had a sense of order and elegance that I really liked. There were tourist groups walking through the streets, locals continuing their daily life, rows of bicycles available for transportation, and lots of greenery, trees, and landscaping. After a short walk, we reached Jardim do Visconde, the central park where there were stalls, tourists, families resting, and a lively but pleasant atmosphere. Then we continued toward Rua Visconde Luz, another popular street filled with restaurants, shops, and visitors. The small square around Estátua de Luís de Camões was surrounded by buildings that almost felt like a movie set. Then we reached the main square, Praça 5 de Outubro, where the first building that caught our attention was Edifício do Relógio, the town's clock tower. In the same square, Estátua de Dom Pedro de Une and Museu da Vila were other notable sites. Cascais felt polished, relaxed, coastal, and very easy to enjoy. After Praça 5 de Outubro, we walked toward the busy beach area. Praia da Ribeira looked a little calmer than Praia da Rainha, but it was still full of people sunbathing and swimming. At the end of the beach, Palacete Seixas, also known as Quinta de Santa Clara, stood in a beautiful and unique location. This part of Cascais really shows why the town is such a popular escape from Lisbon. You have beaches, restaurants, elegant buildings, a walkable center, and that relaxed coastal rhythm. If you want to stay in Cascais, you can find everything from luxury hotels to apart hotel-style accommodation. Between the people enjoying the sea, visitors sitting on benches, and others walking by the coast, Cascais felt like a lively but elegant holiday town. After finishing our Cascais visit, we picked up the car and drove back to Lisbon around sunset. After returning to Lisbon, we left the car at the hotel parking again and took an Uber to Alfama for sunset. The Uber cost around €5. Our first stop was Sé de Lisboa, standing powerfully on the uphill road. Around the cathedral, there were tuk-tuks waiting for customers and a dense tourist crowd. As we continued climbing uphill, Museu do Aljube, Resistência e Liberdade, and Museu de Lisboa Teatro Romano were located just behind the cathedral. Along the way, yellow trams passed through the streets, and souvenir shops and cafes reminded us how touristic this part of Lisbon is. But even with the crowds, Alfama still felt special, because it has layers of history, local details, viewpoints, restaurants, stairs, and narrow streets that create a very strong atmosphere. After a short walk uphill, we reached Miraduro de Santa Luzia, a viewpoint decorated with beautiful blue azulejo tiles. Right next to the terrace, Igreja de Santa Luzia has one of the most scenic positions in Lisbon. Then we continued to what I personally think is one of the best viewpoints in the city, Miraduro das Portas do Sol. We stopped here, enjoyed the view, took photos, and rested for a while. This was one of my favorite moments in Alfama because the view, the light, the rooftops, and the atmosphere all came together beautifully. If you are wondering what to do in Lisbon for sunset, I think Alfama's viewpoints should definitely be on your list. They can be busy, but they are busy for a reason. After Miraduro das Portas do Sol, we passed in front of Museu de Artes Decorativas and continued walking between restaurants. As we descended through the narrow stairs of Alfama Lisbon, we noticed beautiful architectural details, street art, decorated balconies, small restaurants, and tourists waiting in line for cozy dinner spots. Every street had a different style, and this is why Alfama is one of the strongest neighborhoods in Lisbon for atmosphere. It is not a place to rush. You need to walk slowly, look up, look down side streets, and let the area reveal itself. Eventually, we descended toward the waterfront, where large cruise ships were docked and restaurants were full of people. We had dinner in this area and paid around 30 euros per person. After a tiring but beautiful day, we returned to the hotel to rest for the next part of our Portugal trip. For me, one of the biggest lessons from this trip is that you do not need a car inside Lisbon. Uber and Bolt are affordable, and our short rides inside the city usually cost around 5 to 7 euros. If you are staying centrally, walking combined with Uber, Bolt, trams, funiculars, and the metro is more than enough. Also, if you want to feel the soul of the city more deeply, try using Lisbon's trams and funiculars when they are working, because they are not just transportation, they are part of the city's identity. For Sintra and Cascais, you have several options. If you do not want to rent a car, you can take the train from Lisbon, and a round-trip train ticket can be around 5 euros, which makes it one of the cheapest ways to do the route. You can also join organized day tours from Lisbon, usually ranging from around 30 euros to 120 euros, depending on the tour content, how many places are included, whether it is full day, and whether entrance fees are included. Inside Sintra, there are hop-on hop-off buses and a full-day ticket is around 15 euros. In Cascais, coastal hop-on hop-off options are usually around 20 to 25 euros per day. So even without driving, you can still build a very strong Lisbon itinerary that includes Sintra and Cascais. Now let's talk about the part most travel videos skip or only mention quickly: how much this kind of Lisbon trip actually costs. Because Lisbon can be done cheaply, but if you stay centrally, use Uber, eat in tourist areas, visit paid attractions, take a ferry, and add Sintra and Cascais, the total can rise faster than you expect. I am calculating this based on 3 people traveling together, because hotel and car costs were shared. Our hotel was 900 euros for 3 nights, so that means 300 euros per night total, and divided by 3 people, it becomes around 100 euros per person per night. The rental car cost for the Lisbon, Sintra and Cascais part was around 120 euros for 2 days, so that means 60 euros per day total, or around 20 euros per person per day if divided by 3 people. For food, a realistic average based on what we paid would be around 15 to 20 euros per person for lunch and around 30 to 35 euros per person for dinner. So food alone comes to roughly 45 to 55 euros per person per day, not including every small snack or coffee. On our main Lisbon day, we also paid for things like 18 euros for Jeronimos Monastery, 18 euros for the Lisboat Ferry, 6 euros for Elevador de Santa Justa, around 3.5 euros for ice cream. And our share of pastéis de nata and Uber rides, so that day's attractions and local transport added roughly another 45 to 55 euros per person. On the Sintra and Cascais day, the biggest extra cost was the 50 euros per person private Tuk-Tuk tour, plus parking and food. So overall, with hotel, car, meals, attractions, Uber rides, and our paid experiences included, our real average spending was roughly around 210 to 230 euros per person per day. This was not a backpacker budget. We stayed in a comfortable hotel, used Uber, had paid attractions, took a tourist ferry, did a private Tuk-Tuk tour in Sintra, and ate in central tourist areas. But it gives you a realistic idea of what a comfortable Lisbon trip can cost. Now, if you want to do a more budget-friendly version of the same route, you can reduce the cost a lot. Instead of staying at the 300 euros per night hotel, you could stay in a simpler hotel, guest house, or apartment outside the most central luxury areas and bring accommodation down to around 40 to 70 euros per person per night, depending on the season and how many people you share with. Instead of renting a car for Sintra and Cascais, you could use the train with round-trip tickets around 5 euros. And then use the 15 Euro Sintra hop-on hop-off bus instead of paying 50 euros per person for a private Tuk-Tuk. In Cascais, you could walk around the center for free or use a 20 to 25 euro coastal hop-on hop-off option if you want to explore more of the coastline. For food, you could eat in bakeries, local casual restaurants, markets, or smaller cafes, and bring meals down to around 25 to 35 euros per person per day, instead of 45 to 55 euros. You could also skip the 1.8 euro Lisboat ferry, choose free viewpoints instead of every paid viewpoint, and select only 1 or 2 paid attractions. With this approach, a budget-conscious traveler could probably explore Lisbon, Sintra, and Cascais for roughly 80 to 120 euros per person per day, depending mostly on accommodation and how many paid attractions they choose. If you go very simple with accommodation and food, you may even go lower. But for a realistic and still enjoyable first-time trip, I would say 100 euros per person per day is a more comfortable budget-friendly target. If I planned this trip again, I would make a few important changes. First, I would give Lisbon and the surrounding area at least 3 to 4 full days, because 2 days is enough to see many places, but not enough to enjoy them slowly. Second, I would buy tickets in advance for Quinta da Regaleira and Palacio Nacional da Penha, because Sintra is one of those places where poor planning can easily make you miss the highlights. Third, I would use even less car inside Lisbon and rely more on Uber, Bolt, trams, funiculars and walking. Fourth, I would treat Pink Street as a quick photo stop, not a major highlight. Fifth, I would plan more time for Alfama, because this neighborhood deserves slow walking, not just a quick sunset visit. And finally, I would build the whole route with more breathing space, because Lisbon is not a city where you should rush from one checklist item to another. The best moments often happen between the landmarks, in the viewpoints, side streets, cafes, and unexpected corners you find along the way. For me, Lisbon is absolutely worth visiting, but I would not visit it only as a quick capital city break. Lisbon becomes much stronger when you combine it with Belém, Alfama, Chiado, Sintra, Cascais, and the coastal areas around the city. This route was one of my favorite parts of Portugal because it gave us historic neighborhoods, viewpoints, palaces, beaches, food, river views, and very different atmospheres in a short period of time. But I also want to be honest, Lisbon is hilly, it can be tiring, tourist areas can get crowded, and if you don't plan Sintra properly, you may waste time or miss important attractions. Still, I really liked Lisbon together with its coastal towns and nearby villages, and I think this is one of the routes you should definitely do in Portugal. If you only have 2 days, you can follow a version of this route, but if possible, give Lisbon and its surroundings at least 3 to 4 days. That would make the trip more relaxed, more enjoyable, and much easier to experience without feeling rushed. So my honest verdict is this: Lisbon is not perfect, and that is actually part of what makes it interesting. It is beautiful, historic, scenic, affordable in some ways, expensive in others, easy to love but also easy to underestimate. If you plan it well, combine it with Sintra and Cascais, and give yourself enough time, this can easily become one of the most memorable city and coast trips in Europe. That was my real 2-day Lisbon experience, including central Lisbon, Belém, Alfama, Sintra, Cascais, real costs, transportation, food, and the honest mistakes I would avoid next time. Portugal surprised me in many different ways, from Porto's riverside charm to Lisbon's hills, Sintra's fairy tale streets, Cascais coastline, and the Algarve's dramatic beaches. So if you are planning your own Portugal trip, make sure to watch the full Portugal travel series on my channel. If this video helped you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone planning a trip to Portugal, and write your questions in the comments. Because I always try to help from my own real travel experience.